Hi, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Solidarity Live. We are here to talk what's sort of been on everyone's mind since we first found out we had a vaccine. How is everybody going to get one? When? How to speed that process up, make it more fair? And when is all of this over? Good morning, Alex. How are you?
Hey, Jocelyn. Good. Pandemic adjusted terms. I think your intro sets us up well. We have a leader on not just how, not the policy as much as the how are we going to get these politicians to do the things that we need them to do. And as we always note, it's people power. We need organized people demanding that we have access to this vaccine, which is a publicly funded miracle, but it's ours. It's not these corporations. So Margarida Jorge is the executive director of Lower Drug Prices Now, and a longtime colleague and friend of mine. I think we go back over a decade in organizing, always fighting for people to wrest that power away from the corporations. MJ, how are you?
I'm good. Tired of fighting corporations so that we can get basic stuff. Doesn't seem like we're going to be out of a job anytime soon, so keep going.
Unfortunately, but maybe we will. We'll organize our way out of our jobs. That's always the hope here. Tell us about the People's Vaccine and the effort that you're leading on organizing on that issue.
Sure. Well, the coalition, Lower Drug Prices Now, we've done tons of work on the vaccine, and many of our colleagues in the coalition who do global health work. So these are our friends at Public Citizen, at Oxfam, Doctors Without Borders, many organizations who have been making this case that, it's great to have this vaccine here in the US, and it's awesome that the US is a rich country and could put gazillions of dollars into developing it. But now that we have it, we should, share it with everybody, given that we live in a global economy. And you would think that people would sort of have learned that lesson just in the last 10 months, given how this thing has spread. But we actually are having to do a fair amount of advocacy to get even this new elected leadership to share the vaccine with people around the world. And it's the way it's happening, the way the sort of vaccine distribution is playing out is exactly what you'd expect. The rich countries, the US, the UK, Canada, Japan, Switzerland, right? All of these countries are going to have access, and it's really the poorer countries that are going to get left behind. And the reality that I think, President Biden and folks in power need to understand is there is no leaving people behind. You leave China behind, you leave India behind, you leave Pakistan behind, you leave Africa behind. Guess what? It's only a minute before we're all behind, because we do, in fact, actually live in a global community. So the campaign is really about getting people involved and pushing elected leaders to take the needed action.
Well, and it's interesting that we still even have to have this conversation. We only have the coronavirus because political boundaries, which I think we've all internalized since grade school, are so arbitrary. Pathogens don't know borders. That's like a public health axiom, isn't it, Alex? That's your area of expertise too. So how do you face resistance when you're doing this work?
Well, yes.
I mean, sorry, definitely not with elected officials, but like when you're organizing people.
Not so much with people. I mean, I think that the easiest way to talk to people in the US is to make it consistent with what people are experiencing right here in the US, right? Because right here in the US, if you are affluent and you have access to healthcare and resources, you're going to get the vaccine. And we've all read these crazy stories about rich people getting in line in front of seniors or healthcare workers, and they got on their jet and they jumped in line because they had to have the vaccine. And it's the same dynamic around the world, right? So that's pretty readily applicable. It's also not news to people that one of the big obstacles in getting broad access, free access for everybody in America and the world, I mean, our biggest opponent is really pharma, right? They're not for that because it's their product and they want to be able to reserve the right to make as much profit on it as possible. And even all of the stuff that pharma has done, and it's, you know, I'm not sort of downgrading the achievement of actually helping to produce these vaccines. The real heroes of this story are the taxpayers that invested in this medicine. And it really is almost an issue of democracy, right? We invested billions of dollars and deployed our money to create a vaccine. We're not going to get to, you know, worldwide immunization unless we actually get to worldwide immunization. And, you know, we as the people should be able to say to elected officials, we want this, right? We don't want the risk of, you know, walking by somebody in an airport that is, you know, on a layover in Chicago and catching another variant of this disease because the United States and other rich countries wouldn't share the vaccine.
Yeah, you know, Social Security Works is a member of LDPN, and we've been working on this with you all the way. I remember in New York, it was like the last pre-pandemic gathering that we had. We could see what was coming. And then we were talking about the fact that the public, the taxpayer dollars, we developed this, right? And it's only become more and more clear since then. The so-called Moderna vaccine, Moderna invested $0 in it. Dolly Parton invested $1 million more than Moderna did. And all the rest came from the taxpayers. Sidebar, Dolly Parton's a taxpayer too, so 100% is taxpayer funded, regardless of what USA Today and their fact checkers tell my Facebook page when we put that meme out. Still arguing with them about that, by the way. The fact is that's the public's vaccine. That's the people's vaccine. I am even willing to say, okay, on this one, like, I'm going to fight you tooth and nail, J&J, on all other fronts. But you can have your vaccine. You do your thing. But that so-called Moderna one is ours. And we need to take that and we need to create the capacity to spin up billions of doses to vaccinate the world. We need to do that to end this pandemic, and we need that capability to prevent the next pandemic. Otherwise, we will literally find ourselves right back here in years, if not months. So I want to throw something to you that I think you know, but maybe hasn't, you know, gotten out there yet. Pharma, the mRNA vaccines are the Pfizer and the so-called Moderna one. They are open. These two companies are openly saying, not publicly, but openly saying around the Hill and around industry that they are not going to increase capacity further. That this capacity that they're at right now, which is basically enough to spin up vaccines for the US and for rich countries, they're going to stop there. They are not going to keep increasing capacity because they will not be able to profit from that. Right. And I'm like, yeah, that's not the purpose here. We didn't invest this money and create the vaccine for you to profit. We did it to end the pandemic. So your work is so critical because, like, they're not going to do anything other than that, right? We're going to need people to push government to step in.
And it's exactly what we would expect them to do, because like this is not our first go around with these like we've been on many dates with these companies, so we know how this industry works, and we know that they're always going to like stiff you with the bill, right? So I mean, they have this amazing technology. I mean, it's really revolutionary technology, which Pfizer also claims credit for, right? Because Pfizer goes around saying to everybody, oh no, we didn't get any money for research. Well, not this go around. You didn't get money for research, but your mRNA platform was publicly developed. The spike protein that you're using to create the medicine was discovered by publicly funded scientists. So perhaps today your building, the building that you're working in, is not paid for by public money, but all the bricks definitely are, right? So, and it's exactly what we would expect them to do. It's amazing technology. The other vaccines are not going to be as effective, and so they're going to hoard, right, the tier 1 top-notch stuff for rich people, and the rest of the world can just get the cheaper stuff, right? Which is exactly what their model is, because their model is what the market can bear, right? As long as they're able to make money, they're good with it.
And what the market will bear, just to translate that from sociopath speak to everyday people speak, is They want people to die so that everyone else is terrified enough that they'll spend whatever astronomical price tag is attached to this stuff. And I will also say their model does not include ending any disease. They can't make money by ending things, right? Like, we have the technology to end the other pandemic that we're living with, the HIV pandemic. We have the technology to end that right now, but they don't. They won't do it because they can't make money. They make money with disease. They're actually generally on the side of disease. They mitigate things, but it's you said hoard or restrict access, right? It's a scarcity model that they're doing.
That's right.
And they're like, oh, we just don't have enough. And you're like, well, build more. And they're like, no, we like not having enough.
They're like, that's not how the market works. Supply and demands. It's not how it works.
Learn some basic economics, you hippie. And I'm like,
Right.
You know what? I wish you would learn some advanced economics. I think a lot of our problems are that you stopped reading after page 1 of supply and demand. And actually, it's way more complex than that. And one of them is that public goods are not actually constrained by the same thing, because we're not creating Snickers bars here. And I'm not saying the government should create Snickers bars. I'm saying that you can make chocolate bars, but when it comes to ending a pandemic, that's a national security issue. That is an issue of state. And in fact, it's an issue of, we not only need the US government, we need all the governments working together in a cooperative fashion. Otherwise, we will never end this pandemic.
It's kind of insane, isn't it, that we even have to be having this conversation? It wasn't that long ago that this public good thing was a pretty, look, I don't want to hand previous generations too much credit because they did a lot of really bad things. I'm learning to curse less. But thank you, Brad. But the one thing I think that the modern era is pretty bad at is this hyper toxic, hyper profitable individualism. Unlike anything, this World War II mentality of victory gardens and we're all in this together seems to be totally absent, not just from this conversation, but from all the conversations we've had during this pandemic.
Mm-hmm. I really agree with you, Jocelyn, because there's this great book, and we've done a little bit of work with this author that wrote the big book on pharma, this Gerald Posner guy, who actually makes the same case in his book. And he talks about World War II as an example. During World War II, when penicillin was being refined and developed for mass production as part of the war effort, they were in the exact same situation, and they made a different choice, right? They were in the exact same situation. Merck was the leading company. Merck said, we can definitely refine this and manufacture, a lot of it for the war effort. We would like to have an exclusive patent. And, national leaders came back and said, this is a worldwide war. Absolutely not. We cannot give you an exclusive patent. We're going to do an open patent, and we're going to have 11 companies manufacture it. And the government's going to build facilities to actually scale up the manufacturing, right? It was a whole different sensibility about what was responsible use of public money and how corporations could work actually with government, as opposed to this kind of shady model where there's all kinds of, business as usual, secret contracts. Sometimes reporters will ask me, well, how much do you think it should cost? Well, it's very difficult to get to that number, given that you can't actually get a copy of the contract, right? So it's not even clear. The government is not even being transparent about what they're negotiating with these drug companies. When we asked the previous, HHS secretary, is this going to be affordable? He just shrugged. I don't know. It's up to the companies. It's up to the companies. You just gave them $12 billion of our money to manufacture a vaccine. It certainly cannot be up to the companies. So it's very, in this very complicated public health space right now, even though the people footing the bill really are the people that are responsible for making progress on the vaccine, there's not even sensibility that we are stakeholders. Right? We're not even treated like stakeholders. It's like, thanks for paying for all of this stuff. You guys go sit out there and we'll let you know what happens with the vaccine.
Yeah, they are. So something that you bring up from Posner's book that's just so maddening to me and Alex Zaitchik has written on this in the New Republic, is like, there's this like, oh, well, what are they supposed to do? And you're like, literally what they did all the way up until 1980.
Right.
Like, it's not like it's a long time we've been locked in this model. It's since it's 1980, and then we can see it's not working. So like, why can't people just believe that, at least on this pandemic, right? Like, it shut down the world. 500,000 Americans are dead. Does your ideology have to, in the face of all of this, like, oh no, private industry has totally got this. And you're like, they don't got it. They don't got it at all. And we know what to do. You have government, again, their industry was involved in the vaccine effort as well, which, led to what we have now as BARDA, but which is a pale facsimile at this point. But the wartime effort before that, when we were eradicating diseases, it involved industry. Industry was involved. You just had actual public government on top of it being like, hey, you guys share this data. You have this know-how, you have this know-how, I want you to work together. And, if somebody was like, hey, I'm thinking of charging $1 million for this, they're like, wham, no, you're not, right? Like, it's not that hard. But right now, what we have is all of these companies, none of them are sharing any data, none of them are sharing any know-how. How much redundant research has been done when everyone should be sharing everything? It's a pandemic, people. We can end it. So like, it's maddening to me because we know exactly what needs to be done. So I kind of want to take it to the, like, how are you seeing, what's your feel for where we are? I heard a little bit of it. Like, I don't think the administration is there yet. I feel like we have some global leadership that understands what is necessary. And we have some movement, but it doesn't feel like enough yet.
I don't think it's enough yet. And I think, especially in terms of the global vaccine debate, it's completely possible that the president really sees this as much as a just straight up foreign policy issue as opposed to a global health issue. So what we know about Biden is that he is committed to trying to restore the United States as a global health leader, right? One of the first things he did was rejoin the WTO. We're starting to hear from people like Congresswoman Schakowsky and even Speaker Pelosi have said, we're very encouraged, we're feeling very positive. They think that, the president should agree to the waiver that is being proposed at the World Trade Organization, essentially a waiver so everybody can get access to the vaccine. And it's going to be a question, I think, both of people, including people in Congress, frankly, putting pressure on the president to really deliver from a public health point of view. There is no way out of this pandemic, and his own experts will tell him the same, unless we actually figure out how to share the vaccine and vaccinate the entire world, unless we plan to close borders for the next 20 years. Right?
And even that won't work, right? Like that, as long as we have air travel, this is what it all comes down to.
Right.
From a public health point of view, we have models. As long as there are airplanes flying, there is no way to keep a pathogen out. I mean, you can keep a giant bug like Ebola out because it's very localized and it kills people very quickly. But this coronavirus, it's set up, there's no way that you can shut it down except to immunize people.
And it's more dangerous now because of the many variants, right? And it's becoming clearer and clearer that actually the vaccines may not work on the variants, right? And so in some ways, as the situation worsens, it creates more pressure and more opportunity. And the question is, can we capitalize on that opportunity and organize our way into the solution that we want? And I think between the fact that we actually do have a public health crisis with more variants, with greater possibility of spread, and you have a foreign policy situation shaping up where we're not operating in a vacuum, right? Russia and China have this vaccine too, and Russia and China are using this vaccine, their version of the vaccine, to build influence in other areas of the country. I sort of view Biden as sophisticated on the foreign policy stuff. I mean, he likes it. right? And he understands that rebuilding our influence is going to be tied to the vaccine. Now, we shouldn't underestimate the influence of pharma, right? These are multinational corporations. They have a lot of influence. They're going to fight really hard. But I think, already there is it hasn't even been that long that really the people's vaccine folks have been meeting and really pushing, but they've got a lot of people on board. They've got some big names with them. They are moving people in the legislature. Those secondary targets have to move the president. But I think we have to keep the pressure up. And a key thing, and Alex will tell you this too, because he's been an organizer for a long time, some of the magic of organizing and actually getting to enough power to win is recognizing an opportunity, right? And often that opportunity is just the flip side of a crisis. We're in a crisis. This opportunity is a huge opportunity. It's a huge opportunity to get the United States repositioned in terms of a global health role and to change the culture around the way we think about global health and sharing resources. And the fact that we have a stake. It's not just like we're being good people and we would like to share this vaccine with you. In fact, there is no long-term recovery from this pandemic without a global approach. That's just the bottom line, right? Anybody who tells you different is just living in some kind of denial, and they're taking the wrong pill while living in the matrix, right? But in reality, there is no way out, not from an economic point of view, not from a public health point of view. And Biden, the new administration, the new Congress are under tremendous pressure to fix this, right? Every poll in America is telling us right now that the pandemic is the number one thing on people's minds. Like, this problem has got to be solved. So I think those are all conditions that are very helpful. And then it's about the organizing. Can we get enough people to do enough things to really push this over the edge?
And Margarida, I think you're absolutely correct. The one positive here is that this paradigm shift in how we view resources, our communities, ourselves, has broad implications for everything else that we're facing right now with the climate, with healthcare and other parts of healthcare. It's really a question of, are we going to get these people that we elected and we pay to do what they were elected to do? And do you guys ever resent these being turned into lefty issues? None of these are lefty issues. They're pretty banal, normal national security issues.
I think that the regular people, before I came to Washington, I was a door knocker for 15 years. And I'm just going to tell you, I never knocked on anybody's door who didn't have health care or who needed to take up a collection in their church to get a tooth pulled or whatever it was, who thought about these issues ideologically or in terms of left and right? I mean, for somebody who is struggling because they can't get the vaccine for their aging parent, and their aging parent lives 150 miles away from them. Like, for me, on the phone in Neosho, Missouri, trying to get my father-in-law this vaccine, it is not about the politics. It's just a matter of life or death, right? Because my father-in-law works at Walmart. He's 70, and it's just a matter of time before he's going to get sick on his job, right? And so I think you're right, Jocelyn. Like, it's to our advantage to sort of eschew the politics and say there are some things that are more important than politics. Just to echo what Alex was saying, there's some things that are more important than the market. I'm okay with prescription drug companies making some money. They just can't kill people to do it. That's all, right? I'm not an anti-capitalist. It's not a lefty thing. Sure, make money, but you can't peddle poisonous opioids and then get a tax break on your settlement. You can't deny people a vaccine that the public paid for. You can't tell people who have diabetes that you're going to jack up the price of their insulin 300%, right? Those are just basic things. And I think that's where we have a lot of leverage and strength, because at the end of the day, people agree with us. They don't care about the left or the right. Like, that's a bunch of, punditry.
It is, and it's a bunch of money. So I know you know this, and I just want to talk about it though. Pharma is this profound opponent, and we have all fought a variety of opponents in our days, and continue to. Wall Street, for example, right, on Social Security. But I fought pharma for a really long time too, and they are uniquely terrible and powerful. They really, we know what we've got, and we know what we have to do, but pharma is going to corrupt as much as possible. And I really don't yet have a good handle on how to break their propaganda, because they're positioning themselves really well as the heroes of the story right now, right? Like, oh, well, it's these scientists that work for the corporations. And you're like, no, it's not. It's not them. They're scientists who were using taxpayer grants at universities. It's just like, how do we re-educate people? Or it's actually just break the propaganda cannon that is being fired at them all the time. Because people do hate pharma. When you ask them, they're like, oh, I hate the drug companies. But they still have the big lie in their head, right? At the same time, they hate pharma. So it's not about driving down, the favorables of them. It's breaking out of this belief that they've been sold. So maybe you've solved it. I'm hoping, Margarida, since the last time we've spoken, you've solved that question and can just share it with us.
Well, Alex, I have for a long time believed there's only really one way to win things, and it's always the hard way. So I don't think there's an easy way to answer that question. But I think, and I totally agree, I think they are formidable in ways that other opponents are not, right? But I'll say a couple things, and a couple of them are pretty provocative. Like, one reason why they're formidable is because a lot of people who should know better sort of buy their crap, right? So they have bought off a significant proportion of advocacy groups, disease groups, people of color groups that really should know better. In some ways, you can't sort of blame those groups, right? They have to get resources somewhere, but it's a failing proposition, right? You're giving up a lot in the long term in order to get something in the short term. And while they might be helping this group or that group, on the whole, they're poisoning everybody else, right? So I do think it's, I think we've seen this in politics for years, right? Passing around dollar bills seems like a simple tactic, but it actually does work. And when you're pharma and you're passing around like $100,000 bills, it's going to really work. So I think that's in some ways an intractable problem, but I don't think it's a problem that's going to protect them or shield them forever. And the reason is, notwithstanding the fact that they have been doing all of this PR about how awesome they are, right? Like, you've got Johnson & Johnson has their own reality TV show about how they're plugging away on the, creating a vaccine. People don't believe them, right? And we know that because, we have our groups in Pennsylvania, people at the state level who have been polling, and they actually don't believe that pharma is a hero. And a lot of people, in fact, some of the reluctance around the vaccine, when we start, even from people that we don't agree with, like anti-vaxxers, is really about the fact that they actually believe these companies are just in it for the profit. They're not wrong about that. They are in it for the profit. So I think actually regular people are pretty smart, and they kind of see through it. And part of the reason for that is that as Pfizer and Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, all these companies are polishing off their halos and getting in front of the TV to tell everybody how awesome they are, they just raised prices 5% in January, right? And so for your average person that is hearing about how awesome Pfizer is and then goes to the pharmacy and has to pay more for the same thing that they just paid, $30 less for the month before, they're not really fooled by the pharma thing. And I think that is, again, like why the organizing piece is really important, because people's direct experience just actually doesn't mesh with what pharma is saying. And then the other thing I would say about pharma is, their favorite case to make is the innovation case. They love that. Right? It's always like, oh, no, we have to keep prices really high because we're innovating all this awesome medicine. It is a powerful case, but it's not actually a powerful case because pharma is making it. It's a powerful case because Americans love innovation. Like, we love new stuff in America. Like, people are like running out to buy like the brand new iPhone or the brand new Sam. Like, innovation is a powerful mythological story, and that's what they got. And they have a lot of money to pitch it out at scale. So I really see the issue as being scale, right? When we say to people, but it's not really true because they spend more money on marketing than they do on innovation, people generally believe it. The question is, can we get to enough people and really say that at scale? And then the final thing, and I think we all know it, is, politicians, and there are many of them who are constantly talking about taking on pharma, have to actually break up with pharma, right? Like, there's a lot of lip service about pharma this, pharma that, and then you look up their donations and they're getting all this money from pharma. So at some point, politicians have to decide like Senator Booker decided at some point, you know what, enough's enough. I can't take any more money from these people. Like, no, it's just not credible to say that we care about affordable medicine in this country and then be taking money from pharma. And frankly, like a lot of our work is pushing more for that, right? Like, as long as pharma can buy, politicians, and politicians are willing to be like wholly owned subsidiaries of pharma, we're not going to get the reform that we need. So we are going to have to really push for a breakup. Right? They need to break up with pharma and decide that they're going to fall in love with their constituents.
Well, and as you're talking, Margarita, I'm thinking about something we've talked about a couple times, especially last week with Melissa and student debt. I think one of the ways that pharma and the health insurance companies do a really good job of people blinded to that is the medical shame around this. A lot of people have profound amounts of shame about not knowing how to get the vaccine. There's been a lot written about the digital divide and how people who maybe don't know how to navigate the websites are embarrassed. And then like that exacerbates this divide over who gets it and who doesn't. And as we're talking about the stories that healthcare companies and pharma companies tell, we need to create a better story for people that everybody deserves the vaccine. Everybody deserves healthcare. Everybody deserves affordable drugs, instead of this idea that like, if I can't pay for my care, or I don't know how to get it, if I'm an opioid addict, like we are kept very ashamed in this country and very complicit in our own oppression. I mean, how do we fix that though?
Actually, I think even more than saying to people that they deserve it, we should say to people it's ours. It's ours, right? Like I always thought, I mean, Alex should weigh in here too, but I always thought that was the most powerful thing about Social Security, is that people believe it's ours. We pay in, we see it go in, right? And the harder thing about things like vaccine or other healthcare things is we don't see it. We don't have that public ownership story, because we know on things like Social Security or Medicare, when you say to a senior, I'm going to cut Social Security, I mean, you will have armies of seniors in walkers and wheelchairs, because it's ours. This is our Social Security, right? When we hold up the sign, hands off our Social Security, right? And the reality is the substance of the prescription drug issue is the same, right? There are no medicines that have been approved by the FDA that don't include some amount of public money. They do, but people don't know, right? Because the pharma companies have this marketing campaign to persuade people that it's their genius. And then we have a bunch of elected officials that are sort of complicit with them, or actually don't know themselves, because I've been on stage with electeds who didn't know how much we put into innovation. And so I really think it goes back to the democracy story, right? Who are the heroes of democracy? It's not the lawmakers. We elect these people, and there's some really good ones out there. This is our country. We're the decision makers, and we need to act like we're the decision makers instead of acting like somehow we work for the politicians, or but that is really a story about empowering people and helping people to understand all this stuff is ours, and we can deploy it in ways to make our lives better, to help our neighbors, to bring up our families. And that to me is the story, right? It's the story on this issue, and it's the story on a lot of other issues.
Yes, it is. I was just agreeing with you, and like, yeah, I don't have a place to go there other than to say, like, the work that we do, that Jocelyn does at act.tv and I do at Social Security Works and here on Solidarity Live, what we're trying to do is what you're saying. We're trying to get people to understand this ownership, that it's ours. And so our theory, that is not ours alone, is that a big part of what these corporations do, and what, the bosses or the billionaires, the plutocrats, them, and it's real though, but they want to split us up. They want to keep us divided. They want to make it this individual thing, right? Like, oh, you didn't do this, and that's why the world is warming and on fire, right? Oh, you didn't do that, so that's why you deserve to die, because you don't. And all of that is only possible when you've got people in their little cubes. And so a huge part of what organizing is at its root is just getting people together to feel the power that comes when we stand united. and to understand that when we really are united, we can't be defeated, that the people united can never be defeated, which is why the bosses spend so much time dividing us, right? Because they know that they can't beat us when we're together.
Yeah.
And that understanding of our power is the same thing as that ownership, right? And then
I also think it's really important that, sometimes that's why I think it's great you guys have the show, and like there's more and more people that are just putting out their own stuff, because we can't really rely on the mainstream media to give people information. One thing I've noticed on the prescription drug issue is everybody understands that the drug companies are corrupt and that they're ripping us off. People don't always know why. When you start telling people that they can set their own prices, right, that they set the prices, people are like, what? That's really hard for people to believe. They're like, so they can charge what they want, yes, and they can keep raising the price. And then what makes them even madder than that is when you tell them that they're getting tax breaks for things like marketing, right? Then people are like, I can't say it on your show, but you know what I mean, right? People are like, what? Right? So it's not only like, so people are like, how many times am I paying for this drug? So you're paying for it when you're paying taxes for research and development. You're paying for it at the pharmacy. Then you're paying for it again because these guys are going to get a tax break for all those crappy commercials that you have to watch late at night when you're just like trying to get through your show, right? So, I mean, that really does, even just telling people that sometimes is the thing that spurs people to action. Like somebody who might be reluctant to tell their story, or, they'll tell it to you, but they don't want to do a video. But then you're like, but doesn't it piss you off that you have to watch like 14 commercials in a half hour, and that they're all about the evil side effects of a medicine that you're taking for nausea? Like, you take this medicine and it could kill you. Like, doesn't it mess with your head? I mean, so sometimes it is just like we have an assumption that people have access to information, but certainly working on healthcare, like number one thing that you learn is people don't really actually know how it works. They know it's all messed up, but they're like, even when you talk to people, I just remember this, working on the Affordable Care Act, people don't know what premiums are, deductibles. Like if you're a low income person and you've never had insurance, or you're from an immigrant family like my family, where, I'm like doing everybody's paperwork and taking everybody, those folks do not know. It's not because they're stupid people. It's like they just don't know because they've never been able to afford insurance. So they have no idea, right? They're working 2 factory jobs and then a job at the 7-Eleven. Like they don't have time to read the Washington Post. So I think really it's our sort of ability to build power is about understanding who our people are. And a lot of our people are not the people that we run into in the big cities, right? A lot of people are people, living, in Kabul, Missouri, or Hollis, Maine, right? Or wherever, the small towns. And, part of the work that we do, and I know, Alex has done this for years too, is just go out to organizations in those communities and say, well, who are those members? Who are your members? And like, let's actually teach them how wacko this system is. And then that's when people start to feel angry and they feel that agency, because they understand it's not just that these companies are making gazillions of dollars. These companies are screwing us over with our own money, right? Like that's a janitor's money that they are using to deny somebody the vaccine, right? That's a dishwasher's money that they are using to take away somebody's insulin, right? That's our money, and they are stealing from us. And we deserve better from our elected officials. They ought to be leveling the playing field and actually watching out for the regular folks that are out there every single day making the country great.
Yeah, everything you said is so true and so well put, Margarida. I just it's so funny because I think I will never forget being 20 and like a hostess at a restaurant and realizing I'm okay being poor, but do I have to be this poor?
Right? I mean, why do we even have that? Why do we, what is this thing about the working poor? Like the whole thing is if you work, you shouldn't be poor, right? What is that?
And because I think, and I definitely would put 20-year-old Jocelyn in this category, I think there are tons of people who are totally fine not having a yacht or not even owning a home, right?
Sure.
Like, I think there are tons of people who are fine, like, I'll live in a small apartment. Maybe it won't be the fanciest part of town, but why do I have to go bankrupt if I get cancer? Why do I have to not have access to a vaccine in the middle of a deadly pandemic? there's poor and then there's human rights violation. And we're really veering into the human rights violation. I'm kidding, we're already there. But anyways, I'm sorry, I'm going way off track. Margarida, I know we've taken you over time. How can people support the incredible work they're doing? And what else do you want people to know before we let you go?
Well, I would say just two things. One thing is a lot of times we make the most progress, not when we build the wave, but when we see the wave coming and we like dust off our surfboards and we're ready to ride the wave. And I think on prescription drugs, that's the moment that we're in, right? I actually do think after many years, and Alex has been working on it much longer than me, but after many years, we are going to get an opportunity and we need to seize the moment and go as big as we can because we're not going to get this moment again. So that's number one. Number two, I really encourage people, like we have so many smart people working on this issue. You don't need a PhD to work on this issue. Like Alex has a PhD, right? Like you don't need, like you've got all these other people who have PhDs. The most important.
I have a PhD. I don't have a PhD. I have a master's. I know how to find people with PhDs. I can recognize smart people.
He's got a Rolodex. I know he knows people. That's all I can tell you from working with him. Like Alex knows people who know all the things. And what I always say to organizers and to grassroots activists, you don't need to know all the things. Don't feel nervous about knowing all the things. Here's what you have, right? You have a network of people in your family, in your community, your workplace. You've got a story. The one thing that lawmakers and decision makers can't get away from is stories. They really can't, right? When somebody is there and they're saying, my son died because he had to ration insulin, thanks to this company that you all let jack up the price of insulin 300% in the last few years, it's very hard for legislators to run from that. And that is why we're seeing even conservatives jump on board on the prescription drug issue. So I would just say if you are a regular person, you want to get involved, you're not going to get a PhD in this, but you have something to say, you should get on our website, you should get on our list, tell us your story. There, you can click through, tell us your story. There's going to be lots of opportunity for people to tell their testimony, speak on shows like this one, right? Like get on the radio, talk to your neighbors, spread social media. And I think just like so many other important things that we have won in this country, it's really been the power of the people that has gotten us past the corporate interests, the political inertia. And I couldn't agree more, Jocelyn, like right is right. And people know that. We don't have to educate people about what's right. People know that. We just have to create an opportunity to get them to act together in their own interest.
So go to lowerdrugpricesnow.org. And get involved with the work that MJ is leading. Margarida, thank you so much for your time and your leadership on this. And I agree. I like the metaphor. Wax up the surfboard because the wave is coming.
The wave's coming. The wave's coming.
I believe it too. So I'm looking forward to doing some surfing. It's a less violent metaphor than my smash the pharmaceutical corporations to pieces and build something based on justice. Either way, tomato, Margarida.
Yeah, reserve that one on the back. We might still need that one, so you want to reserve that on the back burner.
That one, yeah. Thanks, MJ.
Thanks, guys. Take care. Great to see you.
Great to see you.
So what do you think, Jocelyn?
That was such a great conversation. Yeah, it's really
good.
It's really interesting how this all ties together for me. I mean, it's just the same fight in every moment, whether it's vaccine justice or the climate or student debt. It's these, so I got dinner with my ex-mother-in-law last night. We were talking about taxes and how they're super complicated for middle-class people and working-class people. And like what I'm really struck by is it's like they've made every part of our lives so inscrutably, profitably complex and difficult for working class people, middle class people. I would argue even upper middle class people, same sort of thing, whether it's school loans or health insurance or car insurance. Everything is so complicated for people that we're all sort of ashamed by how easy it is to mess up. And within that, you have these big, terrible people like big pharma or big insurance who are able to profit off of that shame and anxiety because none of this should be this complicated. Health insurance shouldn't be this complicated. Retirement shouldn't be this complicated. I mean, do you read these personal finance books that are like, you know, if you don't have enough money to retire, it's because you're stupid and you're bad at investing and you drink too many lattes. It's like, none of this should be this hard if the government was doing its job. I mean, do you disagree with me though? Am I wrong?
You are correct. I mean, I want to talk about it as financialization because that's what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
What started in the 1980s and what we're seeing now is like the tail end of it is the opposite theory that, you know, we've had basically since civilization started, where it was like, hey, if we get more and more people together, we're going to be able to solve problems that we can't solve individually. And so we built society. And then, you know, like we were like, hey, people are dying because of poison water. And we're like, hey, maybe we can solve that if we work together. So then we built waterworks, right? And we have sewage treatment and we have water treatment. And, you know, you can't do that on your own. It's massive investments. But when you do it, it works for everybody and it's so beneficial. And then we did it really well. And I'm with you. I don't like to go in the old days, it was better. It wasn't, but there were some things that were, and the idea that we were tackling these problems were what neoliberalism is, what this failed experiment that we're living in is the reverse of that. They're taking things that we built together and they're smashing them to pieces and they're profiting off of the destruction of that. And once they took the water treatment that we built together for us and they privatized it and now they've sucked all the resources out, or the grid in Texas that we're seeing the devastation caused by this ideology of just resource extraction. The last chapter of neoliberalism or the Reagan Revolution or the primacy of private industry is actually seeing people, individuals, as just resource or pools of capital that rich people can just stick a extractor into and just suck out money, right, from everything that we do. And it's why it's actually like super profitable to be rich, right? So if you're rich, you get richer. And if you're poor, you get poorer. It's really expensive to not have a lot of money. And it's the opposite. It's profitable to have a lot of money. You brought up the advice columns or whatever. The best genre is the how I paid down my $100,000 in student debt and how you can too. And it's like, you know, I gave up lattes, and then it's like, I got an interest-free loan from my parents. And then it's always that, right? They're like, and I got a job with it's just true. If you are born into wealth in this country, it is a different struggle that you are going to face during your life. Humans will always have a struggle that they have to face, but it's markedly different. It's different if you don't have student debt because your parents help you with school. It's different if your parents help you buy your first home. All of those are ways that we build wealth generationally, and recognizing that right now we're at like the breaking point of that, where all the wealth is being accumulated into a very small handful of people, and everyone else is just seen as places to extract wealth from. What does that look like? It looks like Texas freezing, literally freezing. And what I've read is we were millimeters away from losing the grid, which then if you lose the grid, it takes months for power to come back on. And we were millimeters away from that. And what that looks like is Ted Cruz flying to Cancun to stay at the Ritz-Carlton for the cheap rate of $309 a night, which we know because somebody leaked their group text, which I think is delicious. I'm just like, good for you. Good for you. I hope you keep doing that. My money is on the children of somebody. It's somebody's kid who actually like had their phone or something. That's my money. But this is just what we're looking at. we can solve enormous problems, any problem. We can do it when we work together. We can end this pandemic when we work together. But we have to break that idea that there is this select group of plutocrats who can just continue to profit as much as possible. Because it's one or the other, right? You can either have Texas doesn't freeze and people don't die because of extreme weather, or we can end the pandemic, or you can continue to have the super wealthy have as much money as possible. You can't have both. But that's a really easy solution. You're like, I'm going to go with they can't have another yacht. They've got enough yachts, Jocelyn. I'm not going to let the trillionaires go to Mars. That's not a big deal for me. I don't care if Jeff Bezos doesn't get to go to Mars. I want Amazon workers to be able to afford food and medicine and have health care. This is the choice, and we can do it. We can do it. I like the surfboard analogy. I'm ready. Let's wax up the surfboard. We see the wave coming in, and let's get together and make this change happen.
Well, and I think about, so as you all know, I spend a lot of time thinking about what motivates people, right? In both academic and just a personal sense. And I think the problem we have is that the dangers we're facing are so real and so existential and so uncomfortable that it is understandably very tempting to say, oh, is it so bad? Is the climate really in a state of crisis? Is the pandemic really killing hundreds of thousands of people? And I think the people who do that, I don't think they're stupid, a lot of them. I think they're scared because these are scary things. It is not fun to think of the idea that we are at the edge of civilization. And so what we do with this show, you know where I'm going with this, Alex. But it actually does pair with a lot of like personal epiphanies I've been having. Like, people are motivated by hope. We're not motivated by despair. If we're all gonna die, then why would I be here? I'd be out drinking, you know? Like, actually, now I wouldn't because of the pandemic, but you get the general idea. The reality is these are things that we actually can fix, because the novel nature of a lot of these problems means they haven't been around that long, which means we can do society differently. We have before. And I don't know, I mean, that's exciting for me. Like, when Paul Farmer was on, he was talking about the fact that, like, when we asked him what motivates you, and he says, well, we always win.
We always win.
That's pretty motivating.
I love it. We have a couple more minutes. So can I tell a very hopeful story?
Absolutely. I would love that.
Not hopeful. It's mean, but funny.
All right. Well,
there's this story in the Washingtonian about Donald Trump and his hotel and what the protocol was. And everyone should read it. I'll get the author and I'll put it in under the live stream. I'll say it. Washingtonian though. You can find it. And he was like totally obsessive about things. He had this it's a really gross story about these plutocrats, right? And what they believe is their right. So there's this whole protocol that you had to follow anytime Donald came into the restaurant. And an enormous amount of it is like he always had a shrimp cocktail, a well done steak with ketchup. You had to offer him Diet Coke throughout the meal, and everything had to be opened in front of him because he's terrified of people spitting in his food. They never said like that. They said he's a notorious germaphobe, but if you read it, you're like, this dude is just terrified of the absolutely correct knowledge that people would spit in his food because he is the total POS. But then I read the whole thing and I'm like, this dude is really terrified of people spitting in his food, and he's never worked in the food service industry. So he has created this giant wall that is very easy for people to go around. And the amount of spit that Donald Trump has eaten in his life from all of this BS that he demanded, like, there's no way. There's no way. I've worked in the food service industry. the vast majority of people have never had anything done to their food ever. Why? Because they're not total asshats. But if you do what Donald Trump was demanding, and Steve Mnuchin and all of these people who actually thought that they could build something outside of society, and that's what I want to, that's why I circle back to it. These plutocrats believed that they could build a sort of utopic thing, and they didn't have to interact with the little people, those who they looked down on, and they could construct barriers to keep the barbarians out while they had their disgusting well-done steaks. I mean, what kind of person? But all of it is fake. They can't leave. They're on the same planet as we are. The CEOs of the extractive industries, they're on the same dying planet as us. So they can fly to their island in their yacht, in their jet, whatever, but they're going to have to interact with all the rest of us. So they're just living in this fantasy world, this nightmaric fantasy world that creates a nightmare for us to live in. So like, why, when you just put it in the scales and you're like, okay, so I don't have to worry about dying from a pandemic because we can create a vaccine, and maybe Donald Trump doesn't get his own table at his hotel at BLT, which I'm definitely going to go. We're going to go in there and sit at his table, and then they'll throw us out at some point. But that's on the docket for when this pandemic is over. The point is that we're so correct, and they're so incorrect about how this is working, that all it's going to take is just a slight, I mean, what Margarida was saying, like, we don't have to convince people of anything but our power, that we can build a better world together. And the only thing we have to pay for it with is some of these super rich people are not going to be able to have their shrimp cocktail, well-done steak dinners, pretending that they are in this bubble and you know, at arm's length from the little people.
Which of course will be very tragic for me personally. I mean,
I worry about them. I worry if they'll be able to handle it. These Bond villain people. I mean, they're like, it's just unbelievable.
They're Bond villains.
Bond villains, Jocelyn. So we should say thank you to everybody for tuning in. I think that was like a hopeful-esque story. It was hopeful enough, right, Jocelyn?
I felt hope. And also mirth. And also derision. A lot of mixed emotions.
That's how I feel watching the Ted Cruz story. Ted, you know, fleeing, retreating to Cancun, Mexico. It's just like perfect of these people, right? It's just perfect. He flew to Mexico. He flew to Mexico in the middle of a pandemic. Texas is frozen, and he left his poodle at home. I mean, like, this is the man. This man is supposed to be some sort of moral center. Like, he's a coward. He's a piece of garbage. Like, get rid of him. That's all we have to do to have a better world, is get rid of Ted Cruz and people like him. Just take their power away. Like, I'm for it. Deal.
I love it. And, you know, I mean, I know that we are at time, but I will say my final statement is this. You're right. One, about everything. But two, that Byron Katie quote, you know, she's like a spiritual person, not political at all. You can argue with reality, but you will lose, and only 100% of the time. And that's the really great thing about what we're doing and in the saner side of the aisle, is that we're really working with reality. All we have to do is rely on time, inertia, and a lot of hard work. And solidarity, of course.
And solidarity. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in this week. We'll see you next week on another Solidarity Live. Bye.